Hello, all. Thank you so much for joining today's press call, where elected officials joined by um, policy experts are going to lay out an outline for a roadmap on how to achieve affordability for all. I just want to note that this call is on the record. I'm going to turn it over to Policy Director for Groundwork Collaborative, Liz Pencotti, who will kind of run through a bit of the run of show, give a bit of an overview, and turn it over to our speakers. Liz, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Tresma. My name is Elizabeth Pancotti. I'm the Managing Director of Policy and Advocacy here at the Groundwork Collaborative. I'm so glad to be joined today by our partners at the State Innovation Exchange and Local Progress, as well as a number of elected officials who have championed policies that will bring down costs for working people around the country. This press call is ahead of the release of our new report between our three organizations, which will be released this Thursday. You should receive an embargoed copy just after this call, where Local Progress 6 and Groundwork have put together a menu of 10 tested and popular policies that will bring down costs for working people. When we got together a couple of months ago to do this, we were riding kind of the wave of increased polling showing that affordability is the top concern for voters around the country. On both sides of the aisle and everyone in between, voters are looking for elected officials to champion policies that will bring down the cost of living. Donald Trump campaigned to bring prices down on day one, and unfortunately, he and his allies in Washington are pouring gas on the fire. The president's sweeping and chaotic tariffs on basics from car parts and coffee to diapers and shoes have fueled inflation. Meanwhile, his marquee legislative achievement from this summer, a nearly $5 trillion giveaway to the wealthiest households and large corporations, guts critical programs that help Americans afford basics like healthcare and groceries. As a result, health insurance premiums will double, utility bills will rise, many will go hungry, and tens of thousands will die preventable deaths per year across the country. The vast majority of voters think things are on the wrong track. According to new polling from our organizations and Data for Progress, 7 in 10 voters say that essentials are getting less affordable, and large majorities say inflation and the economy in general are getting worse for them. Fewer than 3 voters believe that federal officials are prioritizing affordability, while state and local leaders earn slightly higher marks. Not a single tier of government clears a majority of voters on their top concern, affordability. While Washington stokes the crisis, progressives around the country are stepping up, like those joining us today. In a time of federal gridlock, corruption, and chaos, state and local officials have been working hand in hand with workers, tenants, and consumers to bring costs down and fight corporate greed. Building on these victories, this agenda offers 10 proven and popular policies that can spread and scale. Our agenda includes 10 popular policies, including building public grocery stores to lower grocery prices, requiring street pricing for concessions at publicly funded venues, capping utility rates to stop forcing families to subsidize big tech, establishing a public option by allowing people to buy into Medicaid, providing baby baskets to new parents, freezing the rent, preventing tech-powered landlord collusion to hike rents, providing public financing for affordable housing development, ending junk fees, and banning surveillance prices. Policymakers have an opportunity and a responsibility to champion policies that put money back in working families' pockets and show that progressive governance can deliver where Trump's agenda fails. We find in our polling that 81% of voters would be more likely to support a candidate for local or state office if they ran on a platform to make life affordable for working families. In particular, we find that families are most looking for policies that will bring down their utility bills, their healthcare costs, and their rent. Our policies are overwhelmingly popular with American voters. We find that all of these policies have the support of more than 70% of voters. And in particular, we asked them if they would be effective at making life more affordable for them. When we asked voters to rank these policies by the most impactful on making life more affordable, they note that they would like to see policies that lower utility bills, allow them to buy into Medicaid, a public option that would compete with private health insurance plans, and establish limits on how much landlords can increase rents each year. Throughout the entire agenda, our 3 organizations found that progressive policies can in fact work for working people and bring down the cost of living. I'm so excited to be joined by a couple of champions who have really held the feet to the fire on many of these fights around the country. And so first, I'd like to welcome Minnesota State House Representative Emma Greenman, who championed Minnesota's ban on junk fees. Representative Greenman, I'll turn it over to you to talk about your fight.
Well, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much, everybody who is here. What I know is Minnesotans, like Americans across the country, are being nickeled and dimed. They're being overcharged and underpaid, exploited by the unchecked corporate power that is stealing the lives and the livelihoods and the economic autonomy from workers, from consumers, from small businesses, from family farmers, and from the next generation across the country. Knock on any door in any community, and you will hear that the public is demanding lower costs and a level playing field for workers and families in an economy that is tilted and been tilted to benefit the powerful corporations and wealthy interests. Well, Trump and the Trump trifecta ram through an oligarch's agenda that we have seen in Washington, literally written and paid for by Trump's billionaire cabinet full of self-interested billionaires. In Minnesota, we've taken a really different path. In the last 2 years, we've been focused on an agenda to unrig the economy, to lower costs for Minnesotans, and to put market power back in the hands of the people where it belongs. One of the things on our agenda has been banning junk fees, which we did in 2023. These hidden and deceptive practices, these fees spread and have spread everywhere. It is impossible to avoid before we pass this bill. When we banned them in 2023, 85% of Minnesotans had reported encountering junk fees, whether it was at the ticket counter, at the phone store, in their rent payments in some cases, at their favorite restaurant, or in the checkout line. It cost on average Minnesotans of over $3,000 for a family per year and hurt consumers, responsible businesses who wanted to do the right thing, and distorted Minnesota's market for goods and services. When I started working on this bill, I would hear from people across the state. They started sending me their receipts. It is crazy how many different ways you see this. Convenience fees, wellness fees, resort fees, service and processing or handling fees, connection fees, facilities fees, and then we started to see this new one, just an inflation fee. Call them what you want, but these junk fees are just another example of the ways that corporations have been using anti-competitive practices in a way that raises costs and squeezes all of us. So in Minnesota, we did something about it. We banned the deceptive practice that is costing Minnesotans, and we now require clear, upfront, all-inclusive pricing. So now when a Minnesotan goes to a Twins game or even gets a hamburger, they know exactly what it'll cost when they're buying it, and they can make informed decisions about how to compare products where they want to spend their money. We've prohibited sellers from advertising or displaying prices that don't include all those mandatory fees and surcharges. And I've been working with the Attorney General's office to make sure that businesses are complying. This is a simple bill. Just tell people what something costs, but the impact has been enormous. It's probably the most popular law that I have ever passed. I still hear about it all the time. People send me their receipts. They send the thank you for just knowing what something costs when you're paying for it. One thing that I will just say as I get wrapped up is that banning junk fees is just one piece of this pie, and we are not done. In Minnesota, in addition to banning junk fees, we eliminated minimum wage carve-outs, banned non-competes, and strengthened our laws to end wage thefts. But while corporate profit and their power continue to soar, many working families continue to be squeezed by industries that put profit over people. We passed laws making insulin and asthma inhalers affordable to all, but for-profit healthcare companies continue to make a profit while leaving Minnesotans drowning in medical debt and unable to get what they need. We passed universal meals, and now every student can learn on a full stomach, but their parents continue to see inflated prices driven by corporate consolidation and greed. There is more work to do, building on the work that we have done for both to get rid of these practices that both are happening to consumers, to small businesses, and to workers on the job. We need to level that playing field. We know that the work is to take our economy back from the giant corporations and the billionaires from what we see happening at the federal level that has been tilted in their favor for far too long. So it's long past due. We do things like you're going to hear on this call, like banning junk fees, like getting rid of these exploitive practices, and put the power back in the hands of Americans and Minnesotans who just want the power to afford their lives.
Thank you so much, Representative Greenman. I'm so excited to hear about the success of these policies, and I can attest it is so much better when we get to see the actual price that we are paying for something. Next, I'd like to welcome Philadelphia City Council Member Nicholas O'Rourke. Councilmember O'Rourke has championed his agenda, Affordable Philly Now, and was the lead sponsor of Philly's ban on AI-powered rent fixing. Thank you so much for joining us, Councilmember O'Rourke. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Liz, for even having me. Good afternoon to everybody who is watching now. I am so glad to join you all today to put some muscle behind everyone's favorite buzzword as of the last 2 weeks, affordability. You can say it with me, affordability. Since getting into office in 2024 as our city's second Working Families Party council member, Philadelphians' ability to afford this city has been my top priority, particularly meeting their material needs, having a material analysis and approach to our governance and our policymaking. I've advocated for citywide guaranteed income programs, introduced a wealth tax with my minority leader, Kendra Brooks, hosted grocery giveaways, and secured an anti-displacement fund for tenants displaced by negligent landlords in poor living conditions. More on that one on another day. And at the core of these affordability issues is what this policy toolkit calls unchecked increasing corporate power. That's what's driving our crushing cost of living crisis. And the clarity that we need as more voices across the political spectrum consider what has brought us to this point. It's this kind of analysis that has led me to take a preemptive approach to policymaking, to stomp out ways that corporate power tries to proliferate further and extend deeper into our lives. I'm proud to say that Philly was the second city in the nation to ban algorithmic rental price fixing through a bill that our office introduced. For those who don't know, landlords are exacerbating the housing affordability crisis by using algorithms to collude to raise rents. Landlords share private data with platforms like RealPage, who then provide a recommendation on where to keep vacancy levels and how to set rent, exacerbating a sense of scarcity and oftentimes driving rents up by double digits. And in Philly, where nearly half of renters spent 35% or more of their income on housing costs, we just can't have that, especially when half the city rents. Now, when we were moving to pass our rental price fixing ban, RealPage actually sent one of their lawyers up from DC, Philly's not too far from there, to try and jam up the works. They actually argued the bill wasn't needed because only a small percentage of Philly landlords use the software. Now, I don't know why they thought that line would work, but they said it. And we knew back then that the issue wasn't how many landlords use the software, but rather which ones use the software. And just a few weeks later, some of the country's largest corporate landlords, I'm talking Greystar, Cushman and Wakefield, with thousands of Philly tenants behind them, were named in the Department of Justice suit against RealPage. Now, that was the last Department of Justice, not this wacky one. It really only made our point for us, right? Big tech does its very best to outpace regulation at any level and to spread as far as possible. That sector is at the heart of the issue of unchecked corporate power. So I'm also glad to actually see policy on surveillance pricing in the mix in this toolkit. So that's great. Here at home, my office is actually also spearheading an initiative called aforementioned Affordable Philly Now, which is looking to do more than introduce solutions to the cost of a living crisis. I feel it's essential to inspire our neighbors to engage, for constituents to accept our invitation to activate their political agency and to organize with us as well as with each other. The first 4 bills on the platform include, 1, the creation of a cost of living task force. Don't jump too quick. I know folks get tired of task force, but I think it's important. It's going to offer concrete policy proposals in a city report in the months to come. So thanks to everyone who worked on this policy menu for giving us more homework as it relates to what that task force will actually do to try to implement here in the city of Philadelphia. Next is the Philly rent refund, the Philly rent refund. This would build on a state program to offer low-income tenants a portion of their rent back on a yearly basis. We're talking about widows and seniors and the differently able on fixed income, giving them back up to $500 a year on their rent at the end of the year. I'm really excited to say that the next two are actually charter changes that require the passage of a ballot question to establish. I'm really looking forward to offering policies that can actually spur democratic engagement and get folks more active as it relates to our political process. The first is the Transit Access Fund, which would create a permanent funding source for free and discounted transit passes for low-income residents. Our city's renowned zero fare program provides free transit to 60,000 Philadelphians at or below the poverty line, but it's been on the chopping block actually this year. We want to secure and expand this model so that many more can actually afford transit in the city of Philadelphia. The second ballot question would ask Philadelphians to ban the privatization of our water department. Somebody might be asking why. I'm glad you asked. In PA, there's this law called Act 12, which has allowed corporations waiting in the wings to start buying water systems and bringing them into private control, that which is publicly owned being brought into privatization. For some smaller locales, the sell-off is a crucial way to pay off debts when they find themselves in a fiscal pickle. But rates have gone up anywhere between 40 to 160% after the sale goes through. Each time, like clockwork, everywhere it happens, the service gets worse and the rates go up. Here's what's worse. Act 12 was passed in 2016, and since then, there have been 22 sales of municipal water systems. Just 2 firms have been the buyer in 21 of 22 sales, 2 of them. And now those 2 firms want to merge. Go figure. So a change to our charter that bans selling off our water department is another preemptive consumer protective measure, if you will. And it keeps Philly far away from this aspiring monopoly over the localities that sell off water systems. Again, we can't let corporate power expand on our watch without a response in this second Gilded Age. We got to catch it before it comes down the pike so we can protect our citizenry. To close, let me wrap up now. As much as I know this is a call with electeds thinking hard about making material gains for working people, we know others will gesture toward affordability cynically. It'll be a talking point, and that's about it. Policy guides like these are so important to putting meat on the bones of what can just seem like this year's term of art and turn of phrase. And I suggest that these policies need to be joined at the hip with ways for constituents to be part of their message. We believe these policies to be winners. We've already really affirmed that already on this call. But it's critical that we build towards future victories as part of the plan to pass some of these ideas into law. The Affordable Philly Now initiative intentionally builds this in at every point. It's why I'm so excited that people will have to pull the lever for 2 of the 4 pieces of the plan so they can directly, actively engage with the thing that people are saying that they want. But even our task force is also going to be informed by a number of civic events, including our first town hall, actually happening this Thursday. We're getting ready for it right now, which is all about the Transit Access Fund, the state level fight for transit funding, and base building for the next round of that fight in 2 years' time, because we already know it's on the calendar. That's how we're trying to have people see themselves in these policies and in something bigger than themselves. What can turn this moment into new connections, new networks, new opportunities to fight corporate power and austerity, to fight Trumpism more than we fight the man himself. And we got to do that. And to get our people what they need and what they want. I believe this is what they're telling us to do. And I believe that we actually can do it and we can win. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Councilmember O'Rourke. As you detailed, there are a number of policies that can make our city and our country more affordable for voters. We've outlined 10 of them, and I know that you have championed so many others. We'd love to now recognize Ohio Representative Munira Abduali, who has introduced the Junk Fee Elimination Act in the Ohio State House. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thanks for hosting this webinar. I think it's so critical. And like the previous speaker, Council Member O'Rourke mentioned, it's a very popular subject. Folks are feeling the pinch of their wallets. People are struggling to afford basic amenities. And so when we talk about things like the junk fee bill, it's not just cutting a dollar here and a dollar there. These dollars add up. When people are not able to afford medication, they're not able to afford groceries. And it unfortunately is going to get worse with this new budget bill that was passed. And so in my district and across Ohio, families are doing everything right, and they're still feeling squeezed from every direction. And they're tired of being tricked, trapped, and taxed by hidden fees. And junk fees are not just a small inconvenience. Again, they're a systemic extraction from working families, whether it's utility bills, rental applications, ticketing platforms, or baking services. Hidden charges are designed to confuse consumers and quietly drain their wallets. When people send me their receipts, just like Representative Emma Greenman, it is so shocking to see how these hidden fees attack people. In fact, I recently became a new renter. I moved back with my parents for a little bit, went to get an apartment, and here I am. I'm thinking I'm getting a deal here. I'm paying $1,200 for rent, and I get my first bill, and there's almost 300 tax on administrative fees. So it wasn't paying 1,200. I'm basically paying $1,500 in rent. And so that's an amount that could mean food. For me as a diabetic, that amount could be medication. And so these junk fees are harmful for people. Folks deserve to be able to budget and to be able to know where they're spending what and to see these costs up front. And so that's why banning junk fees is such a popular legislation. It's one of the few things where folks across the board agree on. Polling shows that more than 3/4 of Democrats, Republicans, and independents want junk fees gone. And that kind of unity only happens when people are truly fed up. People don't like surprises one bit. And so that is why I've taken on ending junk fees as one of my priorities in the state house. But along with banning junk fees, another affordability piece of legislation that I'm working on, my office is working on, and Ohio House Democrats are working on, is to cap the amount of costs on insulin and prescription drugs, because these drugs are so critical, but yet we have these pharmacy, like these drug manufacturer agencies, administrations are tacking on the price of insulin, of asthma medication, when they only cost about $5 to make, and yet we're charging people hundreds of dollars to buy a vial of insulin. And when you go to countries like our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, it costs $10 to $50 to get insulin there. But in America, it'll cost anywhere from $300 to $1,000 to get a vial of insulin, which is absolutely insane. I remember in college, I had to work a full-time job while going full-time school just to be able to afford medication. And it still was difficult. I'd still have to go borrow from a grandparent that had extra insulin and to be able to survive. And so cutting costs on life-saving medication is also part of the fight for affordability, because families should not have to choose between food and life-saving medication, because these two things are both essential to life. And so this moment is proof that when leaders listen to people and not corporate lobbyists, we can deliver real economic relief. When you see states like California, Minnesota, Colorado, Virginia, Massachusetts handling bills to ban junk fees, to cap insulin prices, and it shows these policies are not only working, but they're popular. They save family money immediately. However, unfortunately, to keep it real, Ohio, we are in a super minority. And so it is hard to translate some of these things to fellow legislators. And using these real life stories are very, very helpful to that. And bringing folks from their district to talk to legislators and to really bring this issue to life and tell them how it's affecting folks in their communities has been helpful. But we're still fighting. It's very difficult to pass any of these legislations in Ohio. We are at the point where we're just mitigating harm. with our budget bills, which we passed honestly one of the worst budget bills in Ohio history, unfortunately. But we're still fighting for affordability. We're still trying to get food on people's tables and also help people save money by banning things like junk fees. And I'm hopeful that this legislation, seeing as how popular it is across the board, that we're able to get some movement on that.
Thanks so much.
But
Yes.
thank you guys for having me today.
Of course, thanks so much for joining us. And as you said, while we are you all are in a super minority in the State House, we have a super majority of support on policies like this across all of those in our toolkit, but especially on banning junk fees. I love your tagline of tricked, trapped, and taxed is a good one. Last but not least, thank you so much to New York State Assembly member Linda Rosenthal, who championed New York's ban on AI-powered rent fixing, for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you, Assembly member Rosenthal.
Thank you. And it's great to see all of you. I'm Linda Rosenthal. I chair the Assembly's Committee on Housing, and I represent parts of Hell's Kitchen and the Upper West Side in Manhattan. So thank you for inviting me to speak about my bill, which is now the law, prohibiting landlords from using artificial intelligence to raise the rents in New York. And hopefully, all of you can introduce similar legislation in your states to help combat our national affordability crisis. So I'm a lifelong housing advocate. I got involved when I went to college, came back home, moved in with my grandmother, and the landlord tried to evict us. And so I carry that agita in me, and that's how I got involved in tenant issues, and that's why I was thrilled to be appointed chair in 2022. So in 24, after President Biden's Department of Justice and numerous state attorneys general and sued RealPage for colluding with landlords to raise the rents on working Americans. So RealPage is a real estate software company. It contracts with landlords who agree to provide the company with non-public data, such as lease terms, vacancy rates, and other sensitive information, which is then fed into an algorithm that generates rental recommendations. Those recommendations generally outperform the realities of the housing market, which allows landlords to collectively agree on an inflated rental price for a specific neighborhood through the use of AI. And while this should have already been considered illegal under the 1890 Sherman Antitrust Act, Big Real Estate found a loophole in the law. RealPage and the landlords it contracts with said they're not actually colluding. They're not sitting in a room exchanging sensitive rental information over cigars and whiskey. They're simply providing AI with information. And whatever the algorithm does with it, well, that's what the algorithm does. So it's hard to imagine that the Congress of 1890 could have foreseen the emergency housing situation we're in and the prevalence of AI or its use in creating monopolies. And that's why we need to update our decades-old antitrust laws to reflect the tricks of today's technology. So my legislation was signed into law last month. It not only prohibits landlords from using rent-setting algorithms, it also updates our state's antiquated Donnelly Act, which is New York State's antitrust law, and that's modeled on the federal Sherman Act by making it easier for the Attorney General to investigate and prosecute collusion through artificial intelligence. There's also federal legislation that would update the Sherman Act, but given the federal government's priorities these days, that's not going to move. So I think all of us in our states have to do everything possible to bring down the rents however we can for our residents. So Philadelphia, Minneapolis, Hoboken, Providence, and Seattle have passed similar legislation, and California has passed legislation banning rental price fixing. But, if you're interested, it's critically important that you explain and over-explain the impact of collusion via artificial intelligence. There's a gravely dangerous misconception that this type of collusion is already illegal, so it's not worth pursuing, and that's some of the feedback I got when I introduced the bill from people who should know better. Luckily, we convinced them that it needed to be passed. So, real page tactics have real life consequences on people who are struggling to get by. Renters across the US spent an extra $3.8 billion in 23 because of price fixing algorithms. Atlanta saw the greatest rental increase. Monthly costs increased by $181 a month for many tenants there. Denver and Dallas saw the second and third greatest monthly rent increases, and the national increase in rent was about $70. And so, how the Ohio rep was talking about, people need their money for medication, for food, for everyday expenses. And so $70 is a lot of money. Some of the people I represent can afford to fork over an extra $840 a year, but many cannot. And we cannot let big real estate take advantage of our national housing crisis by inflating people's rents during this time period, or ever, but especially now. And there are many ways we can help lower the rents for people as we continue to build more housing in our states and across the country. So I'm encouraged that, everybody's got their thinking cap on and is moving forward despite the hard times we all face. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks, Assemblymember Rosenthal. Trisma, I'll throw it back over to you for any final questions.
Thanks so much, Liz. If there are any questions for our speakers and the amazing pieces of legislation and proposals that they mentioned on the call today, please feel free to raise your hand or drop the question in the chat. I'll pause for about a minute or so. All right, not hearing any questions being dropped in the chat or hands raised. I will follow up with folks directly to see if there's anything that you needed any clarity on. As Liz noted at the top of the call, items will be provided to folks following the call. This call is embargoed until the 20th of November. All of that will be in your emails, so keep an eye out. Thank you all again for joining. We appreciate it. Have a good one.